A signature on a dotted line can destroy a life faster than a bullet. In the high-stakes world of corporate takeovers, sharks don't just swim in the ocean. They sit at the best tables in New York City, wearing three-piece suits and fake smiles. They rely on the fact that no one reads the fine print, especially not the help. But they didn't account for Elodie. To them, she was just a waitress refilling water glasses. They didn't know she was the only person in the room who understood that page 42 wasn't a business deal. It was a death sentence. This is the story of how a spilled glass of water and a sharp eye brought a billionaire to his knees. The Onyx Room didn't sell food. It sold access. Located on the 45th floor of a skyscraper that pierced the Manhattan clouds, the restaurant smelled of truffle oil, aged mahogany, and old money. The lighting was dim, designed to obscure the age of the patrons and the morality of their conversations. Elodie adjusted the waist of her black trousers, smoothing the fabric. She hated the uniform. It was designed to make the staff blend into the shadows, to be moving furniture rather than people. At 24, with dark circles under her eyes concealed by concealer, she felt older than the architecture. Table 4 needs a refill on the sparkling, Elodie. Don't make eye contact. The guy in the grey suit is in a mood. The floor manager, a nervous man named Charles, whispered as he breezed past her with a tray of oysters. Elodie nodded, grabbing a chilled bottle of San Pellegrino. She knew Table 4. Everyone knew Table 4. It was permanently reserved for Grant. Grant was the kind of billionaire who appeared on magazine covers not for philanthropy, but for ruthless efficiency. He was a corporate raider, a man who bought struggling companies, stripped them of their assets, fired the workers, and sold the carcass for parts. Tonight, he sat opposite an older man who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. The older man was Arthur. He wore a tweed jacket that looked out of place among the Italian silks of the Onyx Room. Arthur was the founder of Green Tech Solutions, a company that had recently made a breakthrough in water filtration. He looked tired, his hands trembling slightly as he held a fountain pen hovering over a thick stack of documents. Elodie approached the table silently. "I'm telling you, Arthur, this is the standard protect and serve agreement," Grant said, his voice smooth like oil on pavement. He took a sip of a wine that cost more than Elodie's tuition had for 3 years. "We keep your staff. We keep the brand. You get to retire with $50 million. Why are you hesitating?" Arthur sighed, placing the pen down. "It just feels rushed, Grant. My lawyer hasn't had a chance to review the final addendum you sent over an hour ago." "Lawyers complicate things to justify their hourly rates," Grant laughed, a hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Look, the board meets tomorrow morning. If we don't have this signed by midnight, the offer is off. The stock price drops, and you lose everything. I'm trying to save your legacy, old friend." Elodie poured the sparkling water into Arthur's glass. As she did, her eyes drifted to the document spread open on the table. It was a reflex. Before her mother got sick, before the medical bills piled up like snowdrifts and forced her to drop out of her second year at Columbia Law, Elodie had been top of her class in contract law. She missed reading. She missed the logic of it. The text was dense, single-spaced, size 8 font. It was designed to be ignored. Grant tapped the paper impatiently. "Just sign on page 42, Arthur. Right there at the bottom." Elodie began to pull away, but a specific phrase caught her eye in the middle of the paragraph. "Cross-collateralization of Class B assets, subject to immediate liquidation upon transfer of majority control." She froze. The bottle hovered in mid-air. That wasn't a standard acquisition clause. That was a kill switch. "Elodie, the water," Grant snapped, not looking at her. "You're hovering." She blinked, retreating into her role. "Apologies, sir." She walked back to the service station, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew what she had seen. If Arthur signed that, Grant wasn't going to keep the staff or the brand. The liquidation clause meant Grant could legally sell off all of Greentech's patents, the actual value of the company, the second the ink was dry, claiming restructuring necessities. Arthur would get his $50 million, sure, but he would be personally liable for the company's existing debts because of the cross-collateralization. The debts would eat the payout. Arthur would walk away with nothing. His employees would be fired instantly. His life's work would be gutted. She looked at the older man. He reminded her of her father before he passed, kind, trusting, and completely unprepared for wolves like Grant. "It's not my business," she whispered to herself. "I need this job. Mum needs the medication." She looked back at table 4. Arthur had picked up the pen again. The tip touched the paper. Grant was leaning forward, a predatory glint in his eyes. He looked like a hunter watching a trap snap shut. Elodie felt a physical sickness in her stomach. If she stayed silent, she was complicit. She grabbed a fresh napkin, her hands shaking. She walked back to the table. "Excuse me, sir," Elodie said, her voice louder than she intended. The chatter in the nearby tables dipped. Grant looked up, annoyed. "We didn't ask for anything." Elodie ignored him and looked directly at Arthur. "Sir, I know I'm just the waitress, and I have no right to speak to you. But please do not sign that." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb about to detonate. Grant's face went a shade of red that clashed with his tie. "Excuse me?" "Page 42, Elodie said, her voice gaining strength. She pointed a shaking finger at the document. Paragraph 3, subsection C, the cross-collateralization clause. It links your personal assets to the company's liabilities the moment majority control transfers. And the liquidation preference in the previous sentence means he can sell the patents immediately. She looked Arthur in the eye. "He's not buying your company, sir. He's bankrupting it and making you pay for the funeral." Grant stood up so abruptly, his chair screeched against the marble floor. It was a violent sound that made the entire restaurant turn to look. "You insolent little—" Grant sputtered, his composure shattering. "Manager! Charles! Get over here now!" Charles, the floor manager, sprinted across the room, his face pale. "Mr. Grant, I am so sorry. I don't know what got into her. She's reading my private legal documents," Grant roared, pointing a manicured finger at Elodie. "She is interfering in a billion-dollar transaction. I want her fired. I want her removed from the building immediately, or I will buy this building and evict this entire restaurant." Arthur, however, was not looking at Grant. He was looking at page 42. He put on his reading glasses, which hung around his neck, and squinted at the text Elodie had indicated. "Arthur, don't listen to her," Grant said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "She's a waitress. She probably thinks collateral is a type of side dish." Arthur didn't speak for a long moment. He traced the lines of text with his finger. Then, slowly, he looked up at Grant. The fear was gone from the old man's eyes, replaced by a cold realization. "She's right," Arthur said softly. "She's not right." Grant slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "She's confused." "No," Arthur said, his voice hardening. Paragraph 3. Subject to immediate liquidation. "You told me you were going to expand the research division. Grant, you told me the patents were safe." "Plans change," Grant hissed. "It's standard boilerplate." "It's fraud," Arthur said. He capped his pen and put it in his pocket. "I'm not signing." Grant looked at Arthur. Then he looked at Elodie. The look he gave her was pure venom. It promised ruin. It promised that he would spend every cent he had to ensure she suffered. "You have made a very big mistake," Grant said to Elodie, his voice calm now, which was terrifying. "You have no idea who you just embarrassed." "Elodie!" Charles, the manager, squeaked, grabbing her arm roughly. "Get your things, you're done. Get out, now." "Let go of her," Arthur said, standing up. "Stay out of this, Arthur," Grant snapped. "You walked away from the deal. Fine, but you don't dictate how this establishment handles its incompetent staff." "I'm leaving," Elodie said, pulling her arm away from Charles. She held her head high, though her knees felt like water. "You don't have to fire me, Charles. I won't work for a place that lets sharks eat the customers." She turned to walk away, but Grant stepped in her path. He was tall, looming over her. "You think you're a hero?" Grant whispered, low enough that only she could hear. "You're a nothing. I'm going to make sure you never work in this city again. I'm going to find out who you are, where you live, and I'm going to bury you in so many lawsuits you'll wish you were dead." Elodie looked him in the eye. "The clause was a trap, sir. And now everyone knows it." She stepped around him and walked toward the kitchen doors. The restaurant was silent as she passed. She could feel the eyes of 50 wealthy patrons burning into her back. She pushed through the swinging doors, the adrenaline finally crashing. She leaned against the stainless steel counter of the prep station, gasping for air. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't undo her apron. "Elodie?" She looked up. It was Lucas, the dishwasher. He was a big guy, quiet, with a history he didn't talk about. "You okay?" I heard shouting. "I just got fired," Elodie said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. "And I think I just made an enemy of a billionaire." "Grant?" Lucas asked. He wiped his hands on a rag. "Yeah, he's bad news. I used to work construction on one of his sites. He cut corners on safety. People got hurt." "I have to go," Elodie said, stripping off the apron and tossing it into the bin. "I need to get home before my mum wakes up." She grabbed her coat from the locker room and exited through the back alley. The cold New York air hit her face, sharp and biting. She checked her phone. 3 missed calls from the pharmacy. The prescription was ready, and it was expensive. She had no job. She had no money coming in. As she reached the end of the alley, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. It was Arthur. "Get in," he said. Elodie stepped back, clutching her purse. "I can't. I don't know you." "You just saved my company," Arthur said, "and you just lost your job because of it. I owe you. Please. Let me at least give you a ride home." Elodie hesitated. She looked up and down the street. It was late, and the subway was a 10-minute walk through a rough neighborhood. "I'm not looking for a reward," she said. "I know." Arthur smiled sadly. "That's why I want to help. You clearly have a legal background. A waitress doesn't spot a cross-collateralization clause by accident." Elodie sighed and opened the car door. "I did 2 years at Columbia. Had to drop out." "Family?" Arthur asked as the car pulled away into traffic. "Mum," Elodie said, looking out the window at the blurring city lights. "Cancer. It's expensive." Arthur nodded slowly. "Grant isn't going to let this go, you know. He's vindictive. He'll come after me, and he'll come after you." "I'm just a nobody," Elodie said. "He'll forget about me by tomorrow." Arthur shook his head. "Men like Grant don't forget. He has an ego the size of this city. You humiliated him. He perceives that as an act of war." Arthur handed her a business card. It was heavy stock, cream-colored. "Arthur Pendleton, CEO, Green Tech." "If you need anything," Arthur said, "call me. Actually, come by the office tomorrow at 9. I might have a job for you. My legal team is evidently lacking if they missed what you saw." Elodie looked at the card. "A job at Green Tech?" It would pay triple what the restaurant did. It could save her mother. "Thank you," she whispered. But as the car turned the corner, neither of them noticed the dark SUV pulling out from the shadows across the street from the restaurant. It trailed them, keeping a steady distance. Grant was making good on his promise. The war had begun. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Green Tech building, turning it into a pillar of fire. To Elodie, standing on the sidewalk in her only professional suit, a charcoal blazer she'd bought at a thrift store for interviews years ago, it looked like a beacon of hope. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. Last night had been a blur of anxiety. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Grant's face, that cold reptilian stare, promising her destruction. But she had Arthur's card. She had a promise of a job. She walked into the lobby. It was sleek, modern, and quiet. She approached the reception desk. "I'm here to see Mr. Pendleton," Elodie said, trying to sound confident. "I have an appointment for 9. The receptionist, a young woman with a headset, looked up. She smiled politely, typed Elodie's name into the system, and then stopped. The smile vanished instantly. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "One moment," the receptionist said, her voice dropping an octave. She picked up a phone and whispered something urgent. She didn't look at Elodie anymore. She looked through her, as if Elodie were a ghost. 2 minutes later, the elevator doors pinged open. It wasn't Arthur who stepped out. It was a man in a sharp navy suit, holding a tablet. He looked like a lawyer, the expensive kind that specialized in cease and desist orders. "Ms. Elodie Rostova?" the man asked. "Yes," Elodie said, stepping forward. "Is Mr. Pendleton ready?" "Mr. Pendleton will not be seeing you," the man said flatly. "My name is Davis. I represent the Human Resources Department of Green Tech Solutions. You are not permitted on the premises." Elodie felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" "Arthur, Mr. Pendleton, told me to come. He offered me a job last night." "Mr. Pendleton was mistaken," Davis said. He tapped his tablet. "Furthermore, we have received a flagged notification regarding your employment history. We cannot hire individuals with pending litigation for corporate espionage." "Corporate espionage?" Elodie's voice rose, echoing in the high-ceilinged lobby. "I was a waitress. I served water." "You were terminated from the Onyx room for violating customer privacy and accessing confidential documents," Davis recited, his tone bored. "Mr. Grant filed a police report this morning. He claims you stole intellectual property." "That's a lie," Elodie shouted. "He's lying to cover up his fraud." Security guards began to move towards them. Davis stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "Listen to me closely. Grant sits on the board of the holding company that insures Green Tech. He called Arthur at 6 a.m. He told Arthur that if you were hired, the insurance underwriting for this entire building would be pulled by noon. Arthur is a good man, but he has 300 employees to protect. He can't sacrifice them for you." Elodie stared at him, her chest heaving. Arthur hadn't betrayed her. He had been checkmated. Grant moved faster than she could comprehend. "Please leave," Davis said, stepping back, "before we call the police." Elodie turned and ran. She burst out of the revolving doors and onto the busy street, fighting back tears of rage. She needed to think. She needed a plan. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a number she recognized. The hospital. St. Jude's Medical Center. "Hello?" Elodie answered, her hand trembling. "Is Mum okay?" "Ms. Rostova, this is Dr. Aris." The voice on the other end was grave. "We need you to come to the billing department immediately." "Is it her heart?" Elodie asked, panic gripping her throat. "Her health is stable for the moment," Dr. Aris said. "But there has been a change in her coverage. the charitable trust that was subsidizing her dialysis and medication. They withdrew support an hour ago. Elodie stopped walking. The city noise faded into a dull roar. The trust? But that was approved for the whole year. The trust is funded by the Titan Group, Dr. Aris said gently. They sent a directive this morning to review all beneficiaries. Your mother's case was flagged as high risk and terminated. Without that funding, the daily cost is $3,000. We can't keep her in the room without an upfront payment. Titan Group, Grant's parent company. He wasn't just suing her. He was killing her mother. Elodie sank onto a bench, the cold metal seeping through her thin trousers. She put her head in her hands. He had told her he would bury her. He hadn't lied. He had stripped her of her job, her reputation. And now, her family's lifeline, all before lunch. She was fighting a god. And she was just an ant. "Hey!" The voice was gruff, familiar. Elodie looked up. Standing over her, wearing a thick hoodie and a beanie, was Lucas, the dishwasher from the Onyx room. He was holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "Lucas?" She wiped her eyes hastily. "What are you doing here?" "I got fired too," Lucas said, sitting down next to her. He handed her a coffee. "Charles said I was fraternizing with the enemy. Grant saw me talking to you in the kitchen." "I'm so sorry," Elodie whispered. "Lucas, I didn't mean to drag you into this." "Don't be sorry." Lucas took a sip of his coffee, his jaw set hard. "I told you, I worked for Grant before, on a construction site in Queens, the Skyline project." Elodie nodded. She remembered the news. A luxury condo building had collapsed during construction 3 years ago. 2 workers died. The investigation ruled it was worker error. "It wasn't worker error," Lucas said, his eyes dark. "Grant made us use a cheaper concrete mix. It wasn't rated for that load. My brother was one of the guys who died." Elodie stared at him. The pieces were falling into place. "You stayed at the Onyx room to watch him?" "I wanted to find something," Lucas admitted. "A way to hurt him. But he's too careful. Until last night." He looked at Elodie. "You saw something in that contract. Something that scared him. What was it?" Elodie took a breath, the caffeine from the coffee hitting her system, sharpening her mind. Cross-collateralization. But it was more than that. He was trying to liquidate Green Tech's assets immediately. Usually, when you buy a company for its tech, you nurture it. You don't gut it on day one unless you don't want the tech, Lucas finished. You want something else. The land, Elodie realized. Her mind flashed back to the contract. All real property rights and subterranean easements. Arthur's factory, Elodie said, her eyes widening. It's in Jersey, on the old industrial marshlands. If Grant buys the company, Lucas said, he owns the land. But why destroy the company? Elodie asked. Why not just buy the land? Because if he buys the land directly, he has to do an environmental impact study, Elodie said, the law school lectures coming back to her. But if he buys the corporation that owns the land, the liability transfers quietly. He can clean it up or cover it up, internally without the EPA sniffing around. Elodie stood up. The despair was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. Grant had made a mistake. He had attacked her mother. He had made it personal. We need to find out what's under that factory, Elodie said, and we need to do it before Arthur signs a new deal. How? Lucas asked. We have no money, no car, and he has eyes everywhere. Elodie looked at the hospital across the street. I need to buy my mum some time. I have a credit card with a $2,000 limit. It'll pay for half a day. After that, we take Grant down. I have a truck, Lucas said, standing up. It's beat up, but it runs, and I have bolt cutters. Elodie looked at him. We're not breaking in, Lucas. That's what he wants. He wants us to be criminals. She pulled out her phone. We're going to do something worse. We're going to do due diligence. The Hall of Records in Newark, New Jersey, was a dusty, fluorescent-lit purgatory that smelled of mildew and bureaucracy. It was the last place a man like Grant would ever be seen, which made it the perfect place for Elodie. It was 2:00 p.m. They had 3 hours until the office closed. What are we looking for? Lucas asked, pulling a heavy drawer of microfiche labelled 1990-1995. Zoning permits, Elodie said, scanning a stack of yellowed maps spread out on a wooden table. GreenTech built their facility in 1998. Before that, the land was owned by a shell company called Obsidian Enterprises. Obsidian, Lucas snorted. Sounds like a bad guy from a comic book. It's a standard liability shield, Elodie muttered, her finger tracing the property lines on the map. Rich guys use them to hold risky assets. If the asset goes bad, the shell company goes bankrupt, but the rich guy's main fortune is untouched. She stopped. Her finger rested on a plot of land directly adjacent to the GreenTech site. Look at this, she said. Lucas leaned over. A creek? No, Elodie said. This drainage pipe. It runs from the Obsidian lot, under the fence, and empties into the reservoir beneath the GreenTech foundation. So, Elodie looked up, her eyes gleaming. Who owned Obsidian? She ran to the computer terminal in the corner. It was ancient, running an operating system that belonged in a museum. She typed in Obsidian Enterprises. Status, dissolved 2001. Registered agent, T. Vance. Director, G. Sterling. Elodie frowned. Sterling. Grant's middle name is Sterling. He owned the land next door? Lucas asked. He owned a chemical processing plant next door, Elodie corrected, clicking on a link to a scanned PDF of a fire inspection report from 1999. Look at the citations. Improper storage of cadmium. Leaking containment units. The plant burned down in 2000. Insurance paid out, and the company dissolved. Where did the chemicals go? Lucas asked. Elodie pointed to the map again. Gravity. They leaked into the groundwater. They flowed downhill. Into the GreenTech property, Lucas realized. Exactly, Elodie said. Arthur built his factory on top of a toxic waste dump that Grant created. Grant knows that if anyone tests the water table, the chemicals will be traced back to his old plant. He'll be liable for billions in cleanup costs and lawsuits. He could go to prison for environmental negligence. So he wants to buy GreenTech, Lucas said, pacing the small room. To shut it down? No, Elodie said, her mind racing. GreenTech makes water filtration systems. Arthur just patented a new nanosieve technology. Grant isn't buying GreenTech to kill it. He's buying it to use Arthur's own technology to filter the groundwater secretly. He cleans up his own mess using the victim's tools, destroys the evidence, and then sells the company for a profit. It was brilliant, it was evil, and it was buried under 20 years of paper. We have the motive, Lucas said, but we need proof. This is all circumstantial. Grant will have a team of lawyers who can explain this away in 5 minutes. We need a sample, Elodie said. We need to get onto the GreenTech property and get a water sample from that reservoir. I told you, Lucas grinned, pulling his keys out. Bolt cutters. Elodie checked her watch. It's 3:30. The shift change at the factory is at 4. If we hurry, we can blend in with the workers leaving. And if we get caught? Lucas asked, his expression serious. This isn't just trespassing, Elodie. Grant plays for keeps. You saw what he did to your mum. Elodie thought of her mother, lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines that were counting down the minutes until the money ran out. She thought of the look on Grant's face, the arrogance, the certainty that he could crush anyone who got in his way. "He started this," Elodie said, grabbing the copies of the maps. "Let's finish it." The drive to the Green Tech facility took 40 minutes. The factory was a sprawling complex of metal and glass, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. It sat on the edge of the marshes, the reeds swaying in the cold wind. Lucas parked the truck a mile down the road, hidden behind a billboard advertising a personal injury lawyer. They walked the rest of the way, sticking to the ditch that ran alongside the road. "There," Lucas pointed. "The delivery gate. It's open." A line of heavy trucks was rumbling out of the complex. The security guard was distracted, checking a clipboard. "On 3, Lucas whispered. They waited for a large semi-truck to pass, using its bulk as a shield. They sprinted across the open asphalt and ducked behind a stack of shipping pallets inside the fence line. They were in. "The reservoir access is behind the main cooling tower," Elodie said, consulting the mental image of the map she had memorized. "North side." They moved through the shadows, dodging forklifts and workers in hard hats. The factory was loud, a symphony of clanking metal and hissing steam. It smelled of ozone and damp earth. They reached the cooling tower. Behind it, almost overgrown with weeds, was a heavy iron hatch set into the concrete. "That's it," Elodie said. Lucas knelt down. He gripped the wheel of the hatch. "It's rusted shut." He grunted, straining against the metal. His biceps bulged, veins popping in his neck. "Come on." With a screech of protesting metal, the wheel turned. Lucas heaved the hatch open. A blast of dank, foul-smelling air hit them. Below in the darkness, water shimmered. "Hold my legs," Elodie said. She pulled a small glass jar from her pocket, an empty jam jar she had grabbed from Lucas's truck. Lucas grabbed her ankles. Elodie lowered herself into the hole, hanging upside down. The blood rushed to her head. She reached down, stretching her arm toward the black water. Her fingers grazed the surface, just a little more. She dipped the jar in. The water was cold and oily. She capped it and signaled to Lucas. He pulled her up. She sat on the concrete, gasping for breath, clutching the jar. The water inside wasn't clear. It was a murky, iridescent sludge. "We got it," she whispered. "Hey." A beam of light hit them. They froze. Standing 20 feet away were 2 security guards, and behind them, stepping out of a black SUV that had rolled up silently on the electric cart path, was a man in a grey suit. It wasn't Grant. It was the man from the lobby, Davis. "I tried to warn you, Miss Rostova," Davis sighed, adjusting his glasses. "We have motion sensors on the perimeter." Elodie scrambled to her feet, hiding the jar behind her back. "We're leaving." "I'm afraid not," Davis said. "You're trespassing on private property, and you're in possession of proprietary trade secrets." He nodded to the guards. "Seize them." Lucas stepped in front of Elodie, his fists raised. "Don't touch her." "Lucas, no," Elodie said. "They're armed." The guards drew tasers. "Wait," Elodie said, her voice shaking but loud. "If you arrest us, this jar goes to the police, and once they analyze what's in it, Grant goes to prison for 20 years. Davis laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You think you can make it to the police station? You're in the middle of nowhere, Elodie. Give me the jar, and you walk away. Keep it, and, well, accidents happen in industrial zones all the time." He took a step forward, his hand extended. "The jar. Now." Elodie looked at Lucas. He was tensed, ready to fight, but the odds were impossible. She looked at the jar in her hand. It was the only leverage they had. She looked Davis in the eye. "Catch," she said. She threw the jar, not at Davis, but high into the air, over the fence, into the dense, muddy marshland outside the perimeter. Davis's eyes widened. He watched the jar arc through the sky and splash into the reeds, lost in the muck. "You idiot!" Davis screamed. "Get them!" "Run!" Lucas yelled. He shoved the nearest guard into the other, creating a chaotic tangle of limbs. He grabbed Elodie's hand, and they sprinted toward the open delivery gate. "Stop them!" Davis roared. They burst out of the gate, legs pumping, lungs burning. They didn't look back. They ran for the truck, the sound of shouting fading behind them. They reached the vehicle. Lucas fumbled with the keys, the engine roared to life, and they peeled out onto the road just as the security SUV cleared the gate. "Did we lose it?" Lucas shouted over the engine noise, looking at her with wide eyes. "You threw the evidence away." Elodie reached into her other pocket and pulled out a small, plastic travel shampoo bottle. It was filled with the same murky water. "I threw the decoy." Elodie smiled, though she was trembling violently. "I filled this one first." Lucas let out a roar of laughter, slamming his hand on the steering wheel. "Elodie, you are terrifying." "Drive, Lucas," she said, clutching the bottle. "We need to find a lab, and we need to find Arthur." But as they sped toward the city, Elodie's phone buzzed. A text message. "Unknown number. You think you're clever, but you just put a target on your back. Say goodbye to your mother." Elodie stared at the screen. The victory evaporated. Grant wasn't playing legal games anymore. He was done with lawsuits. "Lucas," Elodie said, her voice icy calm. "Don't go to the lab. Go to the hospital. Now." The truck screeched to a halt in the emergency bay of St. Jude's Medical Center, the tires smoking against the asphalt. Before the engine had even died, Elodie was out the door, sprinting toward the sliding glass entrance. Lucas was right behind her, his face set in a grim mask of determination. Inside, the hospital was quiet, bathed in the sterile hum of fluorescent lights and ventilation systems. But the quiet was deceptive. As Elodie rounded the corner toward the dialysis wing, she saw them. 2 private security contractors, wearing the same nondescript grey suits as Davis, stood guard outside her mother's room, room 304. A nurse was arguing with them, clutching a clipboard, looking terrified. "You cannot just remove a patient in her condition," the nurse was pleading. "She is in the middle of a cycle." "Directives from the hospital administrator," one of the suits said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Payment default. She is to be transferred to a state facility immediately." "State facility?" Elodie screamed, charging down the hallway. "The nearest state facility with a dialysis unit is 3 hours away. She won't survive the trip." The guards turned, their hands drifting toward their belts. "Mom, step back. This is an administrative matter." "This is murder!" Elodie yelled. She tried to push past them, but the guard caught her arm in a vice-like grip. "Remove her from the premises," the guard muttered to his partner. Suddenly, a heavy hand clamped onto the guard's shoulder. Lucas didn't say a word. He simply yanked the man backward with the force of a wrecking ball. The guard stumbled, losing his grip on Elodie. The second guard reached for his taser, but Lucas stepped into his space, towering over him, radiating a terrifying, raw anger. "Touch her again," Lucas growled, low and dangerous, "and you'll need a room in this hospital." The guards hesitated. They were paid to bully debtors, not fight a man who looked like he bent steel for a living. Elodie used the distraction to burst into the room. Her mother, Sophia, looked small and fragile in the bed. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. The dialysis machine was beeping, a warning alarm. They had already paused the treatment. "Mom!" Elodie rushed to the bedside, grabbing her mother's cold hand. Sophia's eyes fluttered open. "Elodie, they said..." "The money." "Shh, it's okay," Elodie choked out, tears stinging her eyes. She turned to the machine. She knew how to operate it. She had watched the nurses do it 100 times. She reached for the restart button. "Don't touch that!" A woman in a sharp blazer stood in the doorway. It was the hospital administrator, Mrs. Gable. She looked annoyed, holding a tablet. "Ms. Rostova, security was supposed to escort you out. Your mother's account is in arrears. The Titan Group has revoked their sponsorship." Elodie spun around, her body shielding her mother. She didn't look like a waitress anymore. She looked like a predator cornered. "Mrs. Gable," Elodie said, her voice shaking with adrenaline but crystal clear, "if you move this patient 1 inch, I will own this hospital." Mrs. Gable scoffed. "With what money? You're destitute." "Not with money," Elodie snapped. "With the law. Under the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, EMTALA, you are federally mandated to stabilize any patient with an emergency medical condition, regardless of ability to pay. My mother is in mid-treatment. Moving her now constitutes patient dumping. It is a federal violation. The fine is $50,000 per violation, plus immediate termination of your Medicare provider agreement." The room went silent. Mrs. Gable blinked. She hadn't expected the waitress to quote federal statutes. Elodie stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "Furthermore, I know Titan Group pressured you. That makes you complicit in a conspiracy to commit extortion. If my mother dies, Mrs. Gable, I won't sue the hospital. I will sue you, personally, for wrongful death and criminal negligence. I will make sure your name is so toxic you won't be able to get a job running a lemonade stand." Mrs. Gable paled. She looked at the guards, then at the beeping machine, and finally at Elodie's ferocious expression. She was a bureaucrat, not a soldier. She wasn't paid enough to go to prison for Grant. "Restart the machine," Mrs. Gable whispered to the nurse. "But the directive—" The guard started. "I said restart it," Mrs. Gable snapped. She turned to Elodie. "You have 24 hours. After that, if the balance isn't cleared, I can't help you. The board will override me." 24 hours is all I need," Elodie said. The nurse hurried to the machine, and the rhythmic whoosh-click of the pump resumed. Colour began to return to Sophia's cheeks. Elodie slumped against the wall, her knees giving out. Lucas was there instantly, catching her. "You did it," he whispered. "Not yet," Elodie said, pulling the small shampoo bottle of toxic water from her pocket. She looked at it with hatred. "I bought us a day, but Grant won't stop. He'll come back harder." She looked at the clock. It was 6 p.m. "The Green Tech Board meeting is tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., Elodie said. "That's when Grant takes over. That's when he wins." "We have the water," Lucas said. "We take it to the police." "The police will take weeks to process it," Elodie shook her head. "Grant owns the precinct, Captain. The evidence will disappear, just like the inspection reports." She looked at her sleeping mother. She realized that fighting fair was how poor people lost. Grant didn't fight fair. He used leverage. He used fear. "We need a lab report," Elodie said, her mind racing. "A certified independent analysis. Tonight." "I know a guy," Lucas said. "My cousin works maintenance at the university chemistry lab. He can get us in, but he can't run the tests." Elodie stood up, smoothing her blazer. "I took 3 semesters of organic chemistry before I switched to law. I can run a mass spectrometry test. It won't be official, but it will be undeniable." "And then what?" Lucas asked. "We show it to Grant? He won't care." "No," Elodie said, a cold smile touching her lips. "We don't show it to Grant. We show it to the people Grant is trying to trick. We show it to the board of directors." She looked at Lucas. "We're going to crash a $1 billion party." The boardroom of Green Tech Solutions was a fortress of glass and steel on the top floor, offering a panoramic view of the city Grant intended to own. It was 8:05 a.m. 12 people sat around the long oval table. At the head sat Grant, looking immaculate in a bespoke suit, radiating power. To his right was Arthur, looking like a man marching to the gallows. He hadn't slept. His eyes were red-rimmed. The other 10 people were the board of directors, wealthy investors who only cared about one thing: the share price. "We've delayed enough," Grant said, sliding a heavy leather-bound folder toward Arthur. "The terms are final. $50 a share. A full buyout. Sign, Arthur, and save your legacy." Arthur picked up the pen. His hand trembled. "You promised to keep the staff?" "It's in the addendum," Grant lied smoothly. "Just sign." Arthur lowered the pen to the paper. Bam! The double doors of the boardroom swung open with such force that they slammed against the walls. Security guards yelled from the hallway, but Lucas was already there, blocking the doorway with his massive frame, shoving a guard back with one hand. Elodie strode into the room. She hadn't slept in 30 hours. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her clothes were rumpled, but she walked with the stride of an executioner. In her hand, she held a stack of papers and a clear plastic vial containing a clear liquid. "Don't sign it, Arthur!" Elodie's voice rang out, cutting through the stunned silence. "You!" Grant stood up, his face twisting into a snarl. "Security, get this trash out of here." "If you touch me," Elodie said, slamming the stack of papers onto the center of the mahogany table, "you will all go to federal prison for conspiracy to commit environmental terrorism." The room froze. The phrase, federal prison, had a way of grabbing the attention of wealthy people. "This is the Waitress," Grant scoffed, looking at the board members. "She's insane. She's a stalker." "I'm the woman who did the due diligence you failed to do," Elodie said, looking directly at the board members. She pointed to a woman in pearls, Catherine, the lead investor. "Do you know what you're buying, Catherine?" "We're buying a filtration company," Catherine said, looking uncertain. "No," Elodie said. "You're buying a cover-up." She held up the vial. "This is a water sample taken from the aquifer beneath the Green Tech factory yesterday. I ran the mass spectrometry analysis myself at Columbia University's lab at 3 a.m. Here are the results." She tossed the papers across the table. They fanned out. Graphs with red spikes. "Cadmium, mercury, benzene," Elodie recited. "Levels that are 4,000 times the EPA limit. This isn't runoff. This is direct contamination." Grant laughed, but it sounded nervous. "This is absurd. She probably dipped that in a toilet." "The chemical signature matches the specific waste products of Obsidian Enterprises," Elodie continued, ignoring him. "A shell company dissolved in 2001. A company whose primary shareholder was Grant Sterling." She turned to face Grant. He was pale now. Very pale. "You aren't buying Green Tech for the business," Elodie said, her voice rising. "You created the pollution that is poisoning the water table. If the EPA finds out, you're liable. But if you buy Green Tech, you can use Arthur's technology to filter the water secretly. You want to hide your crime using Arthur's invention." "Lies!" Grant shouted. "Remove her!" "Here is the trap," Elodie said, turning back to the board. She locked eyes with them. "Until this moment, you could have claimed ignorance. You could have signed the deal and said you didn't know about the poison." She paused for effect. "But now, I have told you. I have given you the evidence." She pointed a finger at the board. "Under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and the doctrine of willful blindness, if you vote to approve this acquisition now, knowing that the primary asset is a toxic waste crime scene, you are personally liable. You aren't just buying a company. You are becoming accessories after the fact to a felony." Elodie leaned over the table, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Sign that paper, and the FBI won't just come for Grant. They will come for your houses, your portfolios, your freedom." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Catherine picked up the lab report. She looked at it. Then she looked at Grant. "Is this true?" she asked quietly. "Of course not," Grant sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's a fabrication. She's a disgruntled employee." "Then let's test it," Arthur said. Everyone turned to Arthur. The old man stood up. He looked stronger than he had in months. "If it's a lie, Grant," Arthur said, his voice steady, "then you won't mind if we pause the signing for 24 hours to have an independent EPA team survey the land. I'll call my contact at the agency right now." Arthur reached for the phone. Grant lunged. It was a moment of pure desperation. Grant grabbed the phone from Arthur's hand and smashed it against the table. "You stupid old fool! You'll ruin everything!" The mask had slipped. The ruthless businessman was gone. Only the frightened criminal remained. The board members gasped, recoiling from him. "I think," Catherine said, her voice icy, "that the vote is cancelled." "You can't cancel it!" Grant screamed, looking wild. "I own the debt. I'll foreclose on you. I'll destroy this company." Actually, a deep voice boomed from the doorway. Lucas stepped aside. 2 men in windbreakers walked in. On the back of their jackets, in yellow letters, were 3 letters: EPA. Behind them were 2 uniformed NYPD officers. "We received an anonymous tip last night regarding hazardous waste storage," the lead agent said. He looked at the vial on the table, then at Grant. "Mr. Grant Sterling, we have a warrant to search your records regarding Obsidian Enterprises." Grant looked at Elodie. She was standing at the end of the table, her arms crossed, looking at him with a calm, satisfied expression. "You," Grant whispered. "You're just a waitress." "And you," Elodie said softly, "are under arrest." The downfall of Grant Sterling was swift and brutal. When the EPA agents found the rusted pipes connecting the old Obsidian site to the Green Tech land, the dominoes fell. The Titan Group stock plummeted within hours. The board of directors, desperate to save their own skins, cooperated fully with the investigation, handing over every email and threat Grant had ever sent. Grant was indicted on 14 counts of environmental violation, fraud, and racketeering. His assets were frozen. The shark was suddenly bleeding in the water, and the other sharks were hungry. 3 weeks later, the Onyx room was bustling. The clinking of silverware and the hum of conversation filled the air. Elodie sat at table 4. But she wasn't wearing a uniform. She was wearing a tailored navy suit. Arthur sat opposite her. He looked 10 years younger. "The settlement from the Titan Group lawsuit finally cleared," Arthur said, pouring the sparkling water himself. "It's enough to clean up the groundwater and fund the Green Tech expansion for 5 years. "And the patents?" Elodie asked, taking a sip. "Safe," Arthur smiled. "Thanks to you." He slid a document across the table. It was thick, printed on heavy paper. "What is this?" Elodie asked. "An employment contract," Arthur said. "But not for a waitress. I fired my entire legal team. They were useless. They didn't have your instinct." Elodie opened the folder. The title at the top read, "Head of Legal and Compliance, Green Tech Solutions." Her eyes scanned down to the salary. It was a number that made her breath hitch. It was enough to pay for her mother's care forever. It was enough to buy a house. It was enough to live without fear. "I haven't finished my law degree, Arthur," Elodie said. "I can't practice as an attorney yet." "The company will pay for you to finish night school," Arthur said. "In the meantime, you'll be a consultant. Lucas is already on the payroll." Elodie looked up. "Lucas?" "Head of security," Arthur grinned. "He's very effective. He's currently supervising the installation of the new perimeter fence. No holes this time." Elodie looked out the window at the New York skyline. It looked different now. It didn't look like a fortress built to keep her out. It looked like a city she could help shape. She thought of the clause on page 42, the trap that was meant to destroy them. "You know," Elodie said, picking up the pen, "I should probably read the fine print before I sign this." Arthur laughed. "Please do. I'd be disappointed if you didn't." Elodie pretended to scrutinize the document, then looked at Arthur with a warm smile. "It looks perfect," she said. She signed her name. The waiter approached, a young man, looking nervous, balancing a tray of appetizers. "Excuse me," the waiter stammered. "Compliments of the chef." Elodie looked at him. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the scuffed shoes. She saw herself. "Thank you," Elodie said. She reached into her purse and pulled out $100 bill. She pressed it into the waiter's hand. "Keep the change," she said. "And kid, read everything. Knowledge is the only weapon they can't take away from you." The waiter stared at the money, then at her, shocked. "Thank you, Mum." Elodie watched him walk away. She took a sip of her water. It tasted clean. It tasted like victory. And that is how Elodie Rostova went from refilling glasses to running the boardroom. She proved that in a world of billionaires and bullies, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with the biggest bank account. It's the one who pays attention. Grant Sterling thought he could crush the little people, but he forgot that little people are the ones who build the foundations his world stands on. And when they pull the rug, even giants fall. What would you have done in Elodie's shoes? Would you have spoken up or stayed silent to keep your job? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and remember, always read the fine print. See you in the next video.